Welcome back to the Boomtown podcast. I'm your host, Cameron Walker, the broker and owner of Cameron Walker Realty. And today with me, as always, is Megan Hines, one of our fantastic agents at the brokerage. So welcome, Megan.
Welcome, Cameron.
All right, thank you.
Welcome, everybody.
Absolutely. Well, today we have a great topic. We're going to talk about what some people are starting to refer to as the affordability myth here in Huntsville. As people move here, they have different assumptions about what it's going to cost to live here, in part because of our videos, right? And we want to dig into that a little bit more and give a high-level overview of what's going on, maybe some specifics, but really talk to people about how they can leverage this information in their move and where they choose to live.
Yeah, and I think we need to talk about what is affordable and what is just sort of the same as you would get anywhere else.
Absolutely.
Because when people hear that a place is affordable, we kind of picture what that meant 10 years ago.
Sure.
Which was you go there and you pull out your credit card and you're like, wow, that was cheap for everything.
Yep.
And that's simply not the case.
Absolutely. And what's affordable for one may not be for another, as we all know. But also when we look at these averages, right, they are averages and no one person is the average. Now, it's not the prescription for somebody's life. So a lot of times we look at things like payscale.com, right? They say that on average, Huntsville's 9% cheaper than the average for the nation for living costs. And that may be relevant to you or it may not, depending on your lifestyle, where you live within Huntsville, how large your family is. I think the average family size in these things is 2.3 people. I haven't met a 0.3 people yet.
The main thing that you're saving on in the Huntsville area is housing. And when we break down the numbers, and you just did a video on this.
Houses here on average 28% less than across the nation.
Which is substantial. But when they look at those numbers, they average that in with the cost of food, the cost of clothes, everything. And then you get this number and you're like, oh, Huntsville is this much less expensive. But it's not an average across the board. Most of your savings comes in the area of housing.
It does. And it can confuse people too, because then that's an average of the entire area. Depending on where you are within Huntsville, you may be part of that 28% or you may not, right? There are parts of Huntsville and Madison specifically and Owens Crossroads that are actually slightly higher than the national average. Yeah. So I think when people move here, they think of it as just one big blob, right? Mm-hmm. And it's not. It's several distinct suburbs, parts of the city. Even within Huntsville, you have different parts and different costs. And while that's true everywhere, I think when you're moving across the country, across the state lines, you kind of forget that because you don't know where those lines are drawn around Huntsville and the surrounding suburbs and what it can do to the cost of living and the cost of housing in those areas.
Yeah. And you do get people calling me like, I've heard that Huntsville is less expensive. What do you have for $150,000? And the truth is we have almost nothing. And if you do find something that you think is livable for $150,000, you should ask a lot of questions because probably it really isn't.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know we've run into some issues with even $200,000 houses recently with undisclosed termite damage amongst others. And a lot of times when people are looking at that, because we're a buyer beware state, there's not as much disclosure to begin with. And then those houses that are so far below the market value, there's always a reason. Nobody's just giving away a house. So a lot of times you're looking at things in flood zones, things with undisclosed damage, things with mold, what have you. And the list can go on and on and on. But to your point, you have to ask those questions because there's a reason it's priced so low. And I know people think it's 10, 15 years ago when you could get that great house in the Huntsville area for under $200,000. But we're just not in that time frame anymore.
Yeah. And I also think that we live in the age of technology. Everyone has access to a ton of information on what things should be priced and the market. So you're not going to find that situation where someone has drastically underpriced their home without knowing it. Maybe if it's a for sale by owner and that person lives in a cave and hasn't left their house in years. But, if you're contacting an agent and you're dealing with homes that are probably listed by other agents, it's very unlikely. And that for sale by owner that is underpriced and absolutely perfect is probably like finding a diamond in the park.
Yeah. I actually ran into this. Some clients moving here from California 2 weeks ago. They reached out to me. They had some questions about a house and it was a fixer-upper TLC and it needed a good amount of work. By the time I called the agent, the second day it was on the market, he had 15 offers. Yeah. So it had been, I say by the agent, it was actually the owner. It was listed through a free, cheap listing source to get it on the MLS. But he had no idea how low he had priced it. He had 15 offers. And so they had bid it up to market value anyway. Yeah. And so I'm not saying you can never get a deal. You're never going to get a deal that good because the market's going to correct it.
Absolutely. And that is really interesting, is that the market value the house will find the market value if it's marketed. And unless you're just like the luckiest person in the world and you walk into this house on the first day and you're like, I'll pay full price for this $200,000, 3,000 square foot house in downtown Madison. And they're like, yes. I mean, it's a dream scenario. It's not likely to happen. You're going to be looking at comps and paying what is normal. And what is normal in the Huntsville metropolitan area is probably the mid 300s.
Yeah. Yeah. When I was doing research for the video you mentioned earlier, what I came to was in August of 2025, the average sales price across our region was $331,000. But when you break that up by suburb and different parts of the city, suddenly Madison's in the upper 400s. Owens Crossroads is in the low 400s, but you get out to Tony and Hazel Green and you're sub 300, right?
Yeah.
So it really depends on where you are. And another thing that people don't think about is they try and compare apples to oranges, but mentally make it apples to apples. So if you're looking for a 4,000 square foot home on a 2-acre lot on a brand new home in the best school district, that's not going to be 331,000 anyway out here. Yeah, if you're lucky.
Or more, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and people will come here thinking, well, the average priced home is 331,000, but you're not asking for the average home when you start adding those lists of must-haves. So what I tell people is like, you made a point earlier about the information being available online. There's a lot of misinformation online. And if we speak in too general of terms, like the average sales price in an area, it can be misleading for people. So that's why it's really important when we do a relocation consultation that we understand exactly what people are looking for. And a lot of times I have to give people bad news up front that like what you thought was your budget and what you thought you could get within it, one of those two we have to move. Either we're going to have to look for different criteria or we're going to have to move our budget to accommodate the criteria that's a must-have for you.
Yeah. I mean, it's not all bad news. I think that the space you get here compared to other markets, like if you're coming from California, New York, Washington, you can get like a 3,000 square foot home here within your price range, probably. Like if you're selling your house there and moving here, you're definitely going to come with some money to spend. If you have a house to sell there and you move here, it's just that the idea of this market that is so much less on every level. We still live in modern day America.
Absolutely. Right. And there's so many people that sell a house in one of those coastal cities or Chicago or elsewhere, and then they net so much cash they could move here and be either a cash buyer or such a large down payment for a house that's twice as big. And that's literally happened. People in California sell an 1,800 square foot house for $1.2 million. They move here and buy a 3,600 square foot house for $500,000, $600,000. And it is a significant delta there. So I don't want to act like that doesn't happen.
I mean, your tiny little apartment in New York will get you a massive house here. And that is amazing for people when they move here and they're suddenly in a giant, beautiful house with a pool next to it and walking trails and tennis courts and just everything.
Yeah. But if you're in the outskirts of Chicago and you're an hour outside of it and you sell that house for $250,000, like that's where the misconception comes in that they can then move here and buy an equivalent home within 5 minutes of Redstone Arsenal in the best school district that's brand new for that same $250,000. And so that's where that apples to oranges comes in. If you bought that same house, you might get it for $200 here, an hour outside of Huntsville, say in Arab or over in Rogersville or something like that. That is out there. But now you're talking an hour and 15 commute into Redstone Arsenal.
Yeah. And when we talk about the cost of living, we're talking about more than just housing.
Yes.
And I think the other place that people really win here, the price of gas is less expensive considerably. Whenever I drive someone around, they're like, is that really how much gas is? Or are they just advertising something? Is that like a thing of soda they're talking about on there?
I had somebody ask me one time, is that by the half gallon? So I laughed pretty hard and he was dead serious. Yeah. So that was one of the hardest I've ever laughed.
Yeah. So, I mean, there are things that are definitely less expensive. You're going to save on taxes. You're going to save on gasoline. And the cost of living in terms of your housing is less. When you go to the grocery store, when you go to a restaurant, I don't perceive that it's that much unless you're like coming from downtown Manhattan.
But by and large, a lot of the costs throughout our area are pretty in line, 1% to 2% up or down with the national averages. And I know you and I were talking earlier about your experience living in a larger city with all these restaurants. And you really kind of opened my eyes to not only the lifestyle difference, but the cost difference for me.
Yeah. And so Huntsville is pretty affluent. We have a lot of high wage workers who come here to work on the arsenal and in the tech sector. So there's a lot of money. And what that leads to is a lot of, nice options for dining. But those options are expensive. If you're coming from someplace like Los Angeles or San Francisco or even New York, you're probably used to an array of costs. You can go to multiple taco stands, multiple sandwich shops, and get food that's like $10 or less, like your quick grab bites at any price point. And there's just simply is not that much of that. If you're going to be eating for less here, you're going to be cooking at home.
Yeah, absolutely. And 100% agree with you on that. I know we both have families. If we go out, gosh, if it's all four of us, going over $100 for a meal is very easy. And I'm not
Oh, yeah.
talking glasses of wine or, 3 beers. Like if everybody gets a soft drink, we're pretty much cruising into 100,000. I mean, it's not 100,000. What are we? So cruising into $100 for a dinner. And, I know growing up, it was like $5 a head.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely, things have gotten more expensive. And that's really sped up in the last 5 years. And I think everybody feels it. And they might be coming to this area thinking that on every level they'll be receiving a reprieve. And on some levels you absolutely will. But it's not like you can just go out to restaurants and go out and be out all the time and be spending money and have it not affect your bottom line.
For sure, right? I mean, and to your point from a moment ago, it's just not that much cheaper here, if it is at all. And that's on an apples to apples basis, but we don't have on offer the street food that easy walk in and just buy a slice of pizza. I think we just got our buy the slice pizzeria, right?
Yeah.
And it's not like everybody in town could make it by there.
Yeah.
So I do think, and like we've talked about some future episodes that we're going to do, and I do think we will see more of that coming to Huntsville over the next couple of years as some of these newer projects come online.
I mean, Huntsville's urbanizing and there are people moving here. And when you have people moving here the way that they are, you're going to have people with ideas and starting little businesses. And if it works, it works. We might see, street tacos and we do have food trucks and we have food truck rallies, but you can't just go and find a food truck most of the time. Now, it is true that if you get out of Huntsville a little bit, like the price of barbecue in Huntsville, you go to dinner at a barbecue restaurant, which in my mind, when I didn't live here, I would think, oh, that would be cheap. You could spend, $100 for 2 people at a barbecue restaurant around here at a nice one, right?
Yeah.
But if you drive out and you're kind of like a little bit more in a rural area, you might find, that $4 barbecue sandwich, and it might be amazing and probably better.
Yeah, I mean, I'm over there on the East Limestone side of Madison.
Yeah.
Shout out Greenbrier. We go there at least once a week, and they are affordable, and you get a massive plate of food.
Yeah.
And gosh, they bring you like a basket of hush puppies, and it's endless, right? For
Yeah.
no additional cost. So agreed. Once you get down the outskirts, you do find some stuff that's a little bit more affordable, but it's all you have to drive to it.
Yeah, and you kind of have to know where it is too. You kind of have to be in the know. Huntsville and Madison are a little bit different than the rest of Alabama in this way. They're a little bit more urban, and a little bit more affluent.
Yeah.
And you see that in the restaurants. You see that in what people want and what they're willing to pay for.
Yeah. So, all right, I think we've hit the housing and the restaurants. Something else I always get asked about, and I want to bring it up, is the healthcare.
Yeah.
So this is a little surprising to people. Healthcare here can be more expensive. I think it really varies on the type of healthcare you need, but in aggregate, I do think it's above the national average.
Yeah, and that's what I've read as well, which is interesting for a reason that we're going to get into later when we do our next podcast, which is going to be about winners and losers in the economy in terms of work.
Yeah,
like who makes the money and who doesn't.
Yeah, no, 100%. And then again, I think you always need to research the type of specialist you need if you think that's going to be a concern. I know we're like an aging population. A lot of times we got to look at heart doctors, cardiac doctors. When you look at anything cancer related, right? And then at a different stage of life, maybe you're looking at OBs and OBGYN and women's care. So depending on where you are in life, who you are, what concerns you may have with health, you really need to dive into those specific costs because it's not that's again giant blob of cost. It is unique to the different professions and the different distinctions between the medical services that you need and whether you're getting them at a private provider, whether you're getting them at a hospital, what type of insurance you're on. That's something, especially if you're moving here for a job. A lot of people don't realize you may have Blue Cross Blue Shield in one state. You may get it here with your employer, and what's covered, not covered, what percentage is covered, what your copays are can be completely different. That actually happened with us when we moved across state lines. We did not realize that there was going to be a big delta in what was covered and what wasn't.
Yeah, the other thing, and this might be a little bit off topic, but like with the healthcare situation, um, if you're coming from, say, California, you had Kaiser. If you wanted a doctor, you would call, and it was a big group, and they would recommend someone who was in network. Here, you kind of have to find. I mean, kind of. You absolutely have to go and find yourself a personal doctor who will be your go-to, and that person will recommend specialists as needed. And that can be tricky. And I had never had to do that because that's just not how it's done where I'm from.
Yeah, and we have a lot of people PCSing here, particularly with Space Command coming, but not unique to that. It's always happened with the Arsenal here. So then you've got to find carriers who will take TRICARE, and then they've got to refer you to a specialist who will take TRICARE. And so that can become a challenge for people too. Now, one of the things I've consistently heard from our veterans here is that the VA does an amazing job with them here. So I do love hearing that. And that, we worry so much about how the veterans are taken care of. So it does sound like the medical care here is pretty good for them, but it's not like you do everything at the VA. So there are other, primary care doctors and other needs that you really do have to make sure TRICARE can take care of you there.
I mean, once I don't want to scare people because when I've actually like needed to be hospitalized in this area, and the hospitals are very good.
Yep.
And if you have an actual problem and you get into the system with that problem, we have every kind of specialist. We have highly rated hospitals. It's just that first step of finding that physician who's going to be your personal physician can be a little bit challenging here.
Yeah. And this is something anytime I like in our relocation guide on our website, this is something I bring up frequently is if you have medication, daily medication, before you move here, get that 30-day supply. Because it may take you a little while to get in with a new doctor. And even though you may have your old doctor where you were, you no longer have that insurance there, and your insurance here isn't going to cover your medicine from there or whatever else may be needed. So I always tell everybody get that 30-day supply and go ahead. If you've got a situation where you need daily meds, you need to get established with a doctor here before you even arrive
Yeah.
because you don't want that 2 to 3 month wait to go see a doctor. You want to be able to get in immediately so that you can keep your prescription ongoing.
So, let's take it back to cost of living.
Yeah.
I think we've meandered. um, so I think I mean, what are some things you'd like people to take away from this podcast in terms of what the cost of living is, what to expect, and what not to expect?
Sure. Like in a previous video, I talk about three rings. There's kind of the center. If we think about maybe Redstone Arsenal as the center, or maybe Research Park. So that close-in area in Huntsville and Madison are going to be some of the most expensive areas.
Absolutely.
You're also going to have the most amenities there, right? So you're not necessarily having to drive out of the area to do something. So there's a trade-off there, but in general, it's going to be more expensive, and those are going to be above the average prices that you see in, whether it's in one of our videos or elsewhere. Then you have a kind of secondary ring. So now you're out in a little bit of the outer suburbs. You're not outer, but you're looking at maybe Harvest, Hazel Green, Newmarket, even out to Owens Crossroads. And so you're generally looking at a little bit more affordable area, but you're trading that off for a commute. And you can't make that trade off and get every single thing you want and get the same price that you would have gotten in the interior because you're still doing apples to oranges. And then the tertiary one is like we're getting out to Athens, Decatur, maybe all the way up to Tony. And the further you get away from the main city, you start running into separate economies. And so that can kind of mix it up a little bit. So like Athens and Limestone have been the fastest growing city and county, but their prices are rapidly catching up to Madison and Huntsville. They're not there yet, but they're on the way. So that would be a big takeaway, I would say. The other is healthcare, as we mentioned. And then the third is that so many things are close to the national average, and I think that surprises people.
Yeah. And I think something that people might want to consider also is you can get a beautiful house in sort of an inclusive community with a pool, walking trails, tennis courts, gym, And if you do that, you're actually going to save yourself a lot of money, especially if you have children like I do. Every time I leave the house with my children, I spend $100.
Absolutely.
And if I can stay in the neighborhood and you can take them swimming and then to a park and then do all this stuff within your community without even pulling out your wallet, you're going to save like month over month, year over year. That I think that's probably going to be very substantial for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's some communities here with amazing amenities with $500 a year HOA fees. And that's 2 trips out during the summer to take your kids somewhere else, right?
And I would add that the average cost of our HOAs is substantially less than a lot of markets. That's not usually included in any of these, but and I don't have any statistics on that, but just from what I've seen.
Yeah, absolutely. I do have statistics, and I've done a previous video specific to Florida, but no, you're spot on. And so if it costs you $100, $200 to go out as a family for a day trip to a water park, but you also have a pool in your neighborhood that you're paying for on an annual basis, you do save a ton of money that way. And even like kids' birthday parties and stuff like that. Yeah. Call them at your neighborhood pool. Yeah. Then all it costs you is pizza.
Absolutely. Well, I feel like this has been really informative in terms of what you do save on cost of living and what is sort of, pie in the sky.
Absolutely. Hopefully we busted a few myths around like what it costs to live here.
Yeah. And if there's something that you're wondering about and we haven't covered that, please reach out to us. We would love to fill you in, answer any questions.
Absolutely. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching or listening. You can always catch us on audio on wherever you get your podcast, be Spotify, Apple, or you can watch our video on YouTube. Really appreciate you guys being here. Ask that you subscribe so we can keep you informed of everything going on here in Huntsville.